Businesses are built to be sold. And at some point in time, you're going to exit the business. You're not going to give it away. And you certainly don't want it to go poof and be worth nothing. So I think that it behooves anyone who runs a business to take the time to do that planning. Just as you plan for your clients, you need to plan for your business exit.
Hi, I'm Chris Reynolds. And for my entire career, it's been my mission to help independent financial advisors build a better business through a remarkable client experience. In this podcast, you're going to hear from the visionaries, from the leaders, from the independent advisors who are reshaping the future of the financial advice industry. At the end of each episode, I'm going to leave you with at least one winnable idea that you can start implementing right away. Let's turn the page on building a better business. Well, welcome everyone to our next episode of Turning the Page. I'm your host, Chris Reynolds. And today we're going to talk about a favorite subject of mine and many others, which is the importance of succession planning. And to talk to me about that importance of succession planning, I'm going to say, one of the experts in the Canadian marketplace. I've known Bill Black for years, and I'll tell you, he has done it all. He has built an incredibly successful business. He's bought other businesses. He's integrated those businesses, and not in just in one location, in multiple locations. He's brought his daughter in to work for him. He's actually then sold the business. And now, even in his golden years, I'm going to call, he is still helping people with their succession planning. So welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Chris, and welcome to everyone who's checking us out.
Now, as I said, you've done it all. So maybe give a little bit of background. How did you get into this business? Why did you get in this business? And what are the big catalysts for growth that you saw as you were building up your business?
Well, when I initially got into the business, it was a matter of checking all the boxes that I required. And just to mention a couple of them, I wanted to make sure that I didn't really have a boss because I was unemployable. And I wanted to make sure that there really was no artificial constraints in the amount of business that you could do. So in other words, an unlimited number of customers.
Right. And well, that's certainly this business.
Yeah.
And so you went about growing, again, a highly successful business. Maybe how did you do that? What are some of the catalysts for growth that you saw and some of the opportunities that you took advantage of?
Well, I think when we look at running the business, we put a business plan together that had two major elements to it for our growth strategy. One was a organic growth strategy where we're working with clients and getting introductions to great new clients from that client base. And the other piece of our growth strategy was through acquisition or M&A activity. And that, of course, can be accomplished by merging with another planning business or making a purchase from a retired advisor, that type of activity.
So what was, I know that you bought a few of those businesses and integrated them. What would you think was your biggest challenge in that? Things that you had to overcome? Because this is good for people to hear both from an acquiring point of view and from a selling point of view.
Yeah, for sure it is. Some of the challenges that we faced, I think, initially, we worked out over time, but certainly the ability to take a book of business and integrate it, because everyone typically runs their business a little differently. So there's a lot of what I call soft or nuances to running a business. And certainly when upon integration, you don't want everything to change. You don't want to do a 90-degree or 180-degree change on a client base and have them all disturbed. So we were very mindful of the fact that the integration process had to be as smooth as possible while still delivering the services and having the good conversations with the client base that are required.
Well, this is a timely episode because, as you know, a lot of people were just talking even before the podcast where people are, looking to retire. They got the Great Resign going, and our business is no different. And, the observation is, the independent wealth management space in Canada is about 800 billion to 900 billion thereabouts, depending on where the market is at any one time. But about half of that business is owned by people over the age of 60. Now, IPC, we did a survey not that long ago, and we found out that only 11% of advisors actually have a written or a defined succession plan. So hopefully this podcast can help them do that. So you've gone through this process. What is sort of the checklist of getting your business ready for succession, and making sure that that transition is smooth and that you're looked after, your clients are looked after, and the person who takes it over is looked after?
It's a great list, although it needs to be condensed so that it can actually be executed on.
Right.
I think goals and objectives are number one. You really do need to understand personally as an advisor, as a business owner, what you are looking for. I think you need to plan in advance. When we initially put our plan together for the transition of the business, it was 15 years before the actual transition was completed. And not that it wasn't changed within that period of time, but it allowed us to actually run the business, because businesses are built to be sold. And at some point in time, you're going to exit the business. You're not going to give it away, and you certainly don't want it to go poof and be worth nothing. So I think that it behooves anyone who runs a business to take the time to do that planning. Just as you plan for your clients, you need to plan for your business exit, transition, whatever it's going to look like, and make sure that the pieces are in place and that you revisit it. We revisited it on an annual basis because we had partners in the business, family in the business. And so we had some of those extra nuances to deal with.
Well, I think you had every nuance there is. Like, as I said, if I've ever seen, as I said, from your daughter being in the business to having partners to looking for the next succession. But I love that line, is businesses are built to be sold. And I don't think that a lot of advisors think of themselves as a real business to really be sold. And yet the difference in equity value can be quite dramatic depending on it. Now, I know you were always a big believer in putting repeatable systems in place so that it would be easy for it to go from generation to generation. Maybe just comment on that a little bit.
Well, I'd love to, because I think I had an epiphany many, many years ago. And the ceiling of complexity is I can't remember which coach or guru come up with that, but there really is a ceiling of complexity where you can't be effective and efficient. You can't run your business and you can't grow it. So you need to bring people on as you grow the business. And you can't bring people on to run a business the way you would run it without systems that are repeatable and transferable. So you need to have a process. So I investigated a few different consulting firms and actually hired one who will remain nameless. And we entered a 6-month contract. And at the end of that 6-month contract, I had come out with a real process. And then IPC, subsequent to that, came out with the processes that they've put in place. And they mirrored each other very, very closely. So I guess I shouldn't have spent the money, Chris, because you did it anyway.
Well, everybody knows in hindsight now.
Yeah, but we did. We put those processes in place, and that allowed us to grow exponentially.
Now, you've evolved your career, as I said, dramatically from being an advisor to being a business owner, and now you're helping people with exit planning. Maybe tell us about that, because you've worn a lot of hats, and I know a lot of other advisors sort of see everything stopping, but it doesn't really stop, does it?
Well, it certainly doesn't have to. I think that when we look at it, exit planning became a natural developing expertise during my tenure as an advisor, simply because we were focusing on business owners. That's where they keep a lot of the money in this country. So rather than rob a bank because you might get caught, I think dealing with business owners was a really good route to take. And so that we naturally got involved in business owners who are saying, I need to sell. I'm sick. I got to look after my wife. Well, there was all of these incidences or triggering events that happened in their lives, and they weren't prepared. So I went out and certainly got prepared. I had been involved in lots of transactions, actually over 15, both the buy and the sell side. But the reality of the situation was our clients were demanding or looking for really good information. And it's a once in a lifetime event for most clients. And we wanted to make sure that we were giving good advice. So it was a natural evolution for us.
No, and it's certainly something you enjoy and you love doing. My other question would be, since you have seen it and you've seen it on both sides, what are the big mistakes that you observe that people do? I could probably give a checklist as well, but in your observation, we can say what are the things you need for success, but what are the things that are just outright mistakes that almost everyone makes that you should try to avoid?
Mistake number one would be not running your business as a business,
Right.
and not looking at it in that light, and using the word practice. And I always say, if we've been in the business 10 to 20 years and we're still practicing, we should probably get out. So, so we're all running businesses. Advisors are running businesses, and they need to look at it like that. So that would be number one. I think number two would be not having processes that are repeatable and transferable, because you really don't have a business unless there is a repeatable and transferable process. Why would I buy your business, Chris, if your business is all over the map and I can't even figure it out because there's no processes? And so certainly that couldn't be transferable for me if I bought a business and it was all mixed up and I couldn't make any money. So those are the big two. And maybe the third one would be not planning for your own future. It's like the carpenter who never fixes his own door.
Yeah, we were talking about that before. The cobbler's kids that go barefoot. We give great advice to other people about what they should do in succession, and we don't do it as well. And I think the other one that comes across, I know we've talked about it before, is the simplicity of your business. If your business is overly complex or overly reliant on a single person, and that could be you, that person's hard to replace, and therefore not as valuable as one who has a simplistic business that can be easily transferred from person to person.
Absolutely. One of the mantras we always lived by in our business was we should not have an advisor that was not replaceable. In other words, if you're running a business, you want to be redundant. And the minute that you're redundant, you have a business that creates value for someone to take a look at. And if the business is not run like a business and it's a personal services organization, that means that the person isn't there, the value is not there.
Yep, I could not agree more. You probably remember I used to use the example of Tim Hortons versus Pete's Donuts. Which one is more valuable? Okay, because anyone can run a Tim Hortons, but only Pete can run Pete's Donuts. So it's quite that. That's the contrast. How do you develop that Tim Hortons versus being Pete?
Exactly. And I think that the simplicity of running a business is, if you have simplicity in the business, then you can concentrate on what's important. And I know that IPC has been preaching this for many years to advisors, and we certainly do the same. When we look at a business and we're trying to help with a transition, one of the things we want to do is clean the business up, take a look at it, make it simple, get it prepared for an ultimate transition, because most businesses are really not prepared. And the value of that business can be increased by properly structuring it.
Absolutely. And that's where it's important. And it's important for professionals like yourself that help them with that, because to your point, it's a once in a lifetime transaction. It's not something that people will generally have expertise in as professionals. They need to bring other people in. So I have another segment of this podcast, which is rapid fire questions. So I'm going to give you 3 questions. First, Bill, what do you love doing? What is your passion? What is your love? And I'm going to put it around business because I know you have a lot of outside interests as well. But let's try to narrow it down a little bit.
I would say it's really great to get up every day and help people harvest the value of their work, in a nutshell.
I love it. Secondly, what is the most impactful conversation that you've ever had with a client?
A really quick story, because they're kind of stories. I know I can't tell a story here. So woman client became a new client. This was many years ago. Husband was very ill, didn't know what all the papers were that she had. She had a very valuable insurance policy, of which her husband from the hospital had instructed her to cancel. And we stopped the cancellation of the policy, and the money from the policy, we arranged to have it funded. And the money from that policy allowed her to continue on and live a good life, and her husband had passed away, and they were going to eliminate the policy at exactly the wrong time. So it was just a planning item.
Yeah, but still, think of the impact of that person's life and the rest of their family's life for generation. And that's the impact of our business. And thirdly, how do you want to be remembered in the industry or just in general? I think there's always an interesting question.
Hopefully for giving back to the community, both the community as the community you live in and the greater community. I'm a Rotarian. I do a lot of work that way. And also to really help fellow professionals and peers by creating good value and giving good information that will help them through their transitions.
Well, and you've certainly done that. I know almost dozens of people that you've helped in some form in your career, and they always speak incredibly highly of you. So I think you're already going to be remembered for that. So, the next segment is always I do a little rant, and you've probably been reading my rants for sometimes, probably get tired of them sometimes, but this particular rant is an important one, and one that's dear, is the importance of succession planning. It absolutely shocks me that advisors spend years, 20 years, 30 years building these businesses, servicing their clients, and yet, again, statistics shows that only 11% of them actually are ready for any kind of succession plan. I'm not sure that that's very responsible of financial advisors to be quite harsh about it, because you have a responsibility certainly to your family to get the equity value out of the business you built, but you certainly also have a responsibility to your clients to make sure that they are well looked after when you're not there. To your point, advisors, they're relying on you. Your clients rely on your expertise. They're relying on you always be there. And if you're not going to be there, who's going to be there in your place? So that's always my rant. If you haven't thought about your succession plan and you want some help doing it, certainly I would. And I'm going to volunteer. Probably Bill will help you as well, but for a fee. Course. So Bill, this is really interesting. And as I said, you're a guy who has done it all throughout the industry, well respected and built quite an enterprise that you should be extremely proud of what you've done in this business. With that, anything to add?
No, I just think take action, don't wait. The value and importance of what you're talking about, Chris, cannot be underestimated.
I agree. So the one takeaway that you can take from this particular podcast is get a succession plan. Get a written succession plan, know exactly what's going to happen, because it's not just retirement that you might have to worry about. We've had advisors die. We've had them become disabled. But it's hard. As we talked about earlier, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. You might not know all the angles. So, Bill here, he has the exit planning group. That's his next chapter in his life. As you certainly heard, it's his passion to help people extract that value. So, I'm going to volunteer to talk to Bill if you need any help at all. But that would be my one takeaway. Make sure you have a succession plan. Thank you, Bill, for joining our episode of Turning the Page. I'm your host, Chris Reynolds, and look forward to the future episodes.
Thank you.
So if you've liked what you've heard today, do us a favor and hit subscribe. That way you'll find another episode and another actionable takeaway on how to keep building a better business.